Hey everyone, Pure Insanity here. I am so excited to share this video as a Druid Companion build fanatic and build crafter. Druid Companion builds have never been considered meta, and I think for at least Season 2, this build is absolutely meta and OP. Companion vampiric powers are incredibly strong, but Update 1.2 brought some big changes that give this build a lot of power. I queued up a Nightmare Dungeon tier 98 as almost a joke to see how much work I had left to do on my gear and glyphs without any elixirs or incense. But when I started clearing everything, I got elixirs and incense as I realized this had the potential to clear the tier 98 Nightmare Dungeon. There is absolutely more power in this build with both better gear and more glyph leveling. But with all the build testing I've done, I'm confident there will not be any major changes to the final build. In this video, I'll be presenting the full build and gear, along with details on gear affixes and what I'm looking for to make this build even more powerful. This video will cover my leveling strategies along with beginning and mid-game considerations. That said, this build has been so very powerful and very enjoyable from beginning to end game. Additionally, I'll cover some gear swaps for lower level speed clearing and just for some fun build diversity. Before getting into the skill tree, I want to cover the high level view of what this build is and its synergies. I call this a legitimate full companion build as this is leveraging companion skills and damage to its full extent. Shepherd's aspect is so powerful, you can make entire builds around this without really investing in companions, but this is not that kind of build. This build is effectively a companion, landslide, earthen might, and lucky hit build. Poison Creeper is normally considered the most powerful companion, but with Update 1.2 and synergies with this build, all companions are key components to this build. On that note, let's get into the function and purpose of each companion. Starting with wolves, on top of being a defensive frontline and drawing aggro, Ferocious Wolfpack is arguably the best fortification skill after Update 1.2. This synergizes with fortification from Earth skills and healing from both Circle of Life and Hemomancy. Aspect of the Alpha not only improves their damage, but also adds rabies. This synergizes with the crowd control and poison focus of this build. Ravens got a big buff in Update 1.2, and the Brutal Ravens enhancement synergizes with Shepherd's aspect and the range of Hemomancy, clearing many enemies off screen. I left Poison Creeper until last because it has been largely respected as the most powerful companion. With Landslide and Earth skill focus, Poison Creeper deals massive amounts of damage with active casting from the subterranean aspect. In lower level mobs, it is without a doubt the most powerful companion, but in high level Nightmare Dungeons, you're typically less close combat. In higher level Nightmare Dungeons, this can still be quite powerful, jumping in mobs to cast, but it is also well reserved as an escape tool if mobs get past your wolves. Earthspike is the basic skill, and it is not used a lot, but with the aspect of might, it is still cast regularly. Fierce Earthspike is debatable, but with Update 1.2 being based on max life, it is worthwhile. Landslide is the bulk of damage with this build, and Primal Landslide synergizes with the crowd control and immobilization of this build. Cyclone Armor is an outlier, but with Update 1.2 it seemed the frontline wolves were just getting shredded. This may be due to the Update 1.2 differences in damage and damage reduction, but aspect of Cyclonic Force applies to all companions on top of adding physical damage reduction. Call of the Wild is a multiplicative companion damage bonus, and Nature's Reach is also multiplicative, making these two passives very powerful for companions. Update 1.2 did make multiplicative damage much more valuable, and this is also why more points have been spent with Crushing Earth compared to prior build recommendations. Combining Earthen Might with companion builds, Envenom is an incredibly powerful passive. It is additive, but there is no requirement for crowd control, and it applies to both companion damage and cast damage. Circle of Life pairs very well with the fortification focus of this build, and with Hemomancy, health is full or recovered very quickly the majority of time. I will now run through the full Paragon boards. However, I will only cover key points and highlights. That said, I have been really pleased with this Paragon board setup to test a wide array of builds. It is very applicable to a large amount of builds and anything that you want to test. The starting board is a great starting dexterity board, which is why I assigned Outmatch to this board. Our skills and companions, with exception to Poison Creeper, are all physical damage. In addition, Hemomancy is physical damage. Also, the rare nodes in this starting board are for base damage, a damage bucket itself, and resistance, making rare node buffs in this board very valuable. Ancestral Guidance is the second Paragon board, as it contributes 3 critical buffs to this build: core skill damage, spirit, and max life. The goal of this Earthen Might and Lucky Hit focused build is to spam Landslide, which cannot happen without spirit buffs. The Landslide focus also makes core skill damage very valuable and Ancestral Guidance a constant effect. Earthen Devastation is the third Paragon board connecting to the right of Ancestral Guidance. The rotation point was chosen to be the best of 3 key factors: crowd control damage, the Earthen Devastation legendary node, and a willpower based glyph. This configuration makes investing in the human glyph, willpower based, a no-brainer with 65 willpower available with almost no waste. This is also why various alterations of this build using shape-shifting suffers greatly. That said, using shape-shifting skills, the animation and attack speed effects going back and forth tend to affect casting companion skills greatly, and it tends to suffer. To the left of Ancestral Guidance and the 4th Paragon board is Constricting Tendrils. As a Lucky Hit and Poison focused build, the Constricting Tendrils legendary node and board synergize tremendously well, because this board also provides buffs to nature magic, making it a superior selection. Heightened Malice is the 5th Paragon board above Constricting Tendrils. I've seen many build guides advocating the power of this legendary node, but on top of inefficient pathing, this effect can be very unreliable. In the case of finishing off elites and bosses, it will not trigger, but in my experiences, when you quickly kill mobs, it also will not trigger. It is, however, a great board for its poison-related bonuses and glyph socket layout. Thunderstruck is the 6th and final board to the right of Heightened Malice. It is a great ending Paragon board, as the rare nodes have less value, but the pathing is also very efficient. The Tectonic Glyph is used here, but nothing's really invested beyond enabling the additional bonus for 15% plus lucky hit chance. It is not that earth skill critical damage is invaluable, but it applies less to the overall build compared to other glyphs. I'm going to roll through gear screenshots, which you can go back and reference if needed, but I'll discuss the details as I continue with the Tier 98 Nightmare Dungeon video clips. Defensive and utility aspects are aspect of cyclonic force, aspect of disobedience, aspect of might, and aspect of shared misery. As with most builds, damage reduction and total armor are key factors. The bigger change with this build in Season 2 is the desire for maximum life affixes. Hemomancy damage is based on maximum life, and combining maximum life affixes with the Iron Feather Spirit Boon, maximum life becomes highly desirable as both a defensive and offensive affix. The big affix change I'm looking for in my defensive gear is with my helm. I'm up to about 6 million per roll, but I'm looking for ranks to wolves instead of maximum life, but maximum life isn't bad. Offensive aspects are the aspect of the Stampede, aspect of the Alpha, subterranean aspect, aspect of the Aftershock, and Shepherd's aspect. As Shepherd's aspect is the most powerful, it is on my amulet for a 50% boost. I am also using the Butcher's Cleaver unique. The reason why is when combined with aspect of shared misery, both fear and slow will rapidly spread to all enemies. Not only does this free up a utility aspect, previously using aspect of quickstand, but this becomes an offensive capability in this build as feared and slowed enemies take additional damage. You do want at least a couple defensive affixes in your jewelry and weapons, but it's only gloves and your amulet that are really specific for this build. Your gloves should have a near max lucky hit affix with ranks to landslide. Your amulet should have ranks to companions and envenom. Beyond those two pieces of gear and expectations, most damage aspects are flexible. Please refer to other resources if you are looking for more details on damage buckets and how to spread around these affixes to optimize your gear for damage. But if you don't want to do that, my gear is pretty well spread out, so just look at my gear for what I have. My spirit boons are wariness for deer, iron feather for eagle, pack leader and energize for wolf, and obsidian slam for snake. Wariness is fairly standard, and since this build is using Metamorphosis with plus evade charge boots, impairment duration really isn't a big deal. Iron Feather is a Season 2 specific choice, but this is a 14% X, as in multiplier, max life, which combined with Hemomancy makes this spirit boon very powerful. Overall, I haven't seen too much benefit in this build from attack speed, but it's likely beyond Season 2, this Spirit Boon recommendation will change. The Wolf Spirit is my Spirit Bonding selection with both Pack Leader and Energize. This is also a key factor why this build is Lucky Hit centric. Resetting all cooldowns on companion skills is ridiculously good, and outside of casting companion skills, you're spamming landslide, hence the constant need for spirit. The snake spirit is massively underwhelming for this build, and obsidian slam is the only option with any value. And finally, to cover Season 2 specific build choices with vampiric powers, this build uses Coven's Fangs, Feed the Coven, Prey on the Weak, Hemomancy, and Metamorphosis. With all three companion skills, investment into companion damage, and aspect of the Stampede, the Coven's Fangs vampiric power is redonkulously powerful. With Lucky Hit focus already, Feed the Coven is also very powerful to replenish spirit, and it hits so often the 10x damage multiplier is effectively constant. Prey on the Weak is also very powerful, but indirectly. As companions, an aspect of shared misery, spread vulnerability rapidly. It means the exploit glyph can be replaced with a damage glyph. In this build and Paragon board, it meant we could use outmatch instead of exploit. Hemomancy is arguably the best overall vampiric power, but in this build, healing is a weak point. This makes Hemomancy very powerful for this build. And for druids, with the 14% X multiplier spirit boom with Iron Feather, it makes Hemomancy all the more powerful. At this point, I've presented all the build information, but keep watching if you're interested in my leveling recommendations and other commentary about this build. As the current Nightmare Dungeon Tier 98 clip is getting to the boss fight, it's a great segue to talk about boss fights, in particular, the new summon bosses. On the pro side, boss fights tend to be so easy you can ignore all game mechanics. This is true for all Nightmare Dungeon bosses and summon bosses. The only boss fight this doesn't apply to is Uber Lilith, as her spike waves will instantly kill you. It was pretty hilarious when I tried to take on Uber Lilith yesterday and I died over and over again despite how much I took down her health and tanked all of her damage. I realized this build is so powerful I've been button mashing without regard for game mechanics, and consequently, my game mechanics suck. I do have to work on them. That said, there have been a lot of refinements, so that build impact on game mechanics is something that I still do need to learn and I do need to adjust to. Again, though, it's so powerful, game mechanics can really be ignored for the most part. Additionally, this is the first time I've been in Nightmare Dungeons 90 plus, meaning I've got things to learn about how to run that level of dungeon. For beginning to endgame considerations, I was pretty much slapping mobs the entire time. A good lucky hit affix on gloves and tectonic glyph are very important, but I didn't really hit any big leveling wall. I cleared Fallen Temple for Torment at level 55, and Torment was a bit too rough at that point. I'd recommend going to Torment at 65, is not because this build can't handle it, it's just about the overall leveling efficiency. I've had a lot of fun experimenting with uniques. I pretty much have every unique you might think is valuable to this build. That said, there is no additional unique in this build worth it endgame. If you get to Balt's Will, I do think it's worth switching for additional damage in Helltides and lower level Nightmare Dungeons. Every other unique that you think could be valuable sacrifices a key component to this build. I beat this Nightmare Dungeon Tier 98 boss in another minute 40 seconds approximately. So, I guess I'll look for some more talking points. If you're a Druid Companion build fanatic like I am, search no further for the OP build. If you want an easy build to spam buttons where you can loot, search no further. Above all else, it's a game, and enjoy. Have fun. That's what games are meant to be, just having fun. If you're interested in seeing more of my non-meta build crafting, do subscribe and look for Diablo 4 videos. On that note, enjoy the rest of this video, me beating this boss, clearing out a Nightmare Dungeon Tier 98 with a full, legitimate Druid Companion build. Until then, next time.
I must wait a moment. I'm not ready yet.